This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
Hey, this is Christian Roldan.
And Jordan Morris from the Seattle Sounders Football Club.
And you're listening to...
This is Nos Arietes.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
A sideline fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rui Diaz through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nico Ladero leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is good.
Seattle Sounders, the greatest MLS team in history.
They've scored! They've scored! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Is that what you young people call twerking?
And Paul can't say it's cheating.
We want to win. Let's Seattle Thunder, bro.
God bless Seattle!
Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes, sponsored by Full Pull Wines, Watson's Counter, and our Sounder at Heart subscribers. This is the Mailbag episode for week 25 of the MLS season. I am Jeremiah Shan. Joining me today is Aaron Campo and our engineer Lickett. This week, we are going to be trying something different, and we'll see how this format sticks. But for now, all the questions in this week came out of the new Sounder at Heart Discord server. So if you want to get involved, you need to get that link. And if you want to get that link, you need to become a subscriber. So hopefully people want to do this thing and they find enjoyment from us answering their questions. And I was really impressed with the quality of questions that came to us out of the Nos Arietes mailbag room in the server. But Aaron, you want to just go ahead and get us started?
Yeah, and I'll second that. I think being able to go past 280 characters maybe is helpful.
Yeah, exactly.
And, if you were doing that on Twitter, I probably had you blocked because you're a blue subscriber. So I wouldn't have seen it. First one is from BP2U. I don't have any new questions to ask about this current squad or the state of the team. So let's talk about next season. At this point, how big of a roster purge are we talking about? And if it's significant, what does the start of next season look like? E.g., how much time do you think it would take the team to settle in?
Yeah, so I think the starting point, I wrote a column a few weeks ago, or a couple weeks ago at least, about this being probably the most important and potentially impactful offseason in Sounders history. And I think sort of the starting point is you're probably going to have at least two new designated players. I think you're going to have probably at least two new TAM players and probably two new U22 players. And that's I think really the starting point. I in the column, I talked about how something like 52% of the Sounders salary cap commitments this year are going to be potentially off the books this offseason. And that's even before we start getting into the rumors of expanded roster, salary cap space and new roster mechanisms and all these other kind of things. And, if we see many more games like we did on Sunday, I think we probably will see even more turnover than we might have otherwise expected. I'm sort of expecting a guy like Albert Rusnak to be back, but maybe not as a DP. I'm under the assumption that Raul Rui Diaz will be back. And I don't know, Nuhu, who's not out of contract, but there's a lot of guys on this team who I think could be gone potentially. And yeah, I mean, if it depends on how much of the core part of the roster gets moved. But I know that what was funny is that after I wrote this thing about how impactful of an offseason it was going to be, the starting lineup I predicted for first kick looked a lot like a lineup we'd see this year, except for maybe a new number 10.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I definitely think there's going to be huge, significant changes to the roster. I don't think there's any way that there can't be, but I think it could potentially be the roster just gets completely gutted. The Sounders have a lot of players who have value that maybe they don't want to be part of the roster anymore, or conceivably, like they maybe wouldn't want those players to be part of the roster anymore for tactical reasons or just because they want to shake things up. I think they could also replace a couple of players and run it back otherwise and be significantly better. I mean, I think they're a very weird team right now.
Yeah, you make a couple key additions or key changes at impactful positions, and why not? Why couldn't this be a much better team? If you have let's just say you have a new number 10 and a new number 9, you could very easily run this roster back and expect significant improvement. But
yeah, I think if Nico Lodero and Raul Ruidiaz were producing at even a level that barely clears the bar of acceptable for a designated player, this team would not be struggling anywhere near as badly. They're just not producing at all.
Right. Yeah.
And that's a big problem.
All right. This is from Jeff Nusser. He says he has 2 questions. One, why is Schmetzer so reluctant to ever shake things up? He talked again about lineup changes, but that rings hollow at this point when he doesn't follow through. He gets a lot of credit for being a great manager, yet he almost never rocks the boat with his roster. But the only thing I can think of are a couple of instances of benching defenders. Does he just believe his guys way more than we do, or believe in his guys way more than we do? Is he reluctant to disrupt the locker room? I know comparisons to Europe can be faulty, but man, I have to think that a European approach would have benched guys like Nico and Ruidiaz long ago without a lot of thought about sentimentality. And then on a related note, he wants to know, at this point, is it plausible to believe that a front line of Chu, Morris, literally anyone has a higher likelihood of production than Chu, Ruidiaz, along with or Chu, Ruidiaz / Abear and Morris? I guess we can take the second part. I'll just take the second part first if you want to jump into the first part. I don't know. That's tough. I don't think you can put like Paul Rothrock as the center forward and expect better production. But anyway, do you want to tackle that first part?
Yeah, and I think on the second point, I think that if Chu and Morris are left forward and center forward, and I think in a perfect world, Christian Roldan is your right winger. That's to me what they should be doing.
Yes.
And that kind of ties in, that dovetails nicely with the first question. It's driving me insane. I love Brian Schmetzer. I have defended him a lot. I still think he's a very good coach. I do not know what he's doing. I do not get it. It's the same players lining up the same way, being instructed to do the same things. And it's been happening for over a calendar year now, for since last season. It's the same stuff. They're failing in the exact same ways. And it's gotten worse, if anything.
Yeah, I think that's what struck me is just how it does seem to be getting, for the last 6 games, they went from not scoring a ton, but at least playing really good defense, to just like not doing either.
Yeah. I think the thing that really shocks me is that this was something he talked about, and we've come back to this several times on this show. This is something he talked about at the end of last season of he was trusting guys too much. He was trusting them to work things out. And then what happened early this season? He was forced to make changes. Raul was hurt. Right. There were a lot of different things he had to do. I don't think there's any way Leo Chu was expected to be a nailed on starter earlier in the season, but he was, and he took advantage of it. Jordan Morris looked great as a striker, as a center forward. When he was forced to make changes, he found ways to make it work and to make things work. And then everybody more or less got healthy, and it's back to the same old stuff.
Yeah.
And I agree. I don't think that every club in Europe, like you're going to see Raul and Nico get benched. There are plenty of clubs in Europe that have the same issue. And there are teams in MLS that are quick to bench their main guys. But I don't understand how they can keep doing this. And that doesn't mean Raul should never play again. That doesn't mean Nico should never play again. But the idea that they are just guaranteed a spot is shocking with their level of production or lack thereof.
Yeah.
So the next one, it's a two-parter from STL Sounder, but the second part of it is I think more or less the same as the last one. So we'll just go with the first question. Do you think we'll ever see a game postponed due to smoke?
I mean, I would think so. But that threshold is, I think we were just reminded, is very high.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it's the threshold's not going to get lower. If anything, the threshold, like, I don't know what the official threshold is. I guess I've heard that it might be if the AQI goes over 200, they would postpone it. But, we were up in like the 170s or something like that, 180s for the game, maybe in 190s. And best I could tell, there was no serious discussion about postponing the game. And I guess on some level, from a practical perspective, like a just purely logistical perspective, I kind of get it. If you move, you want to do everything you can to avoid postponing games, just because the logistics of it are a pain. But I was shocked that there was no water breaks. Yeah. There was like seemingly no effort at all to mitigate the effects of the smoke. And the players said they noticed it, but they weren't complaining. But
right.
I don't know. It's,
yeah, I mean, I'm willing to believe that the fitness level of professional soccer players is high enough that maybe it's not that bad for them to deal with. But the lack of water breaks was pretty nuts. I think if anything, it's encouraging people to leave the house and come together in large numbers. It's not just the athletes, right? But like 30,000 people sitting in smoke for 2 hours doesn't seem great to me.
Yeah.
But
and I'll add, best I can tell, the league makes these calls, not on the ground.
Yeah.
Like the Sounders or the team doctor or whatever. Like, best I can tell, that it's a league decision, unless I suppose it's possible that someone on the ground could be like, this is insanity. We can't play, and they press the red button or whatever. But
seems unlikely.
Yeah. All right. So this is from CW. They've got one serious question, one silly one. They said there's a lot of change on the horizon, and the roster will probably look pretty different next year. Pretend for a second that the mass exodus is full bore. Nico gone, Rusnak not willing to play for TAM level, Rui Diaz bought out, Aber and Arriaga out the door as well. You've got 3 DP spots that are open and TAM to play with. What scheme are you installing, and who are you bringing in to do it? Realism is appreciated, but feel free to dream big, and let's dream it up post-summer window, because this likely will come in changes. And then I'll just add the second question, and maybe you want to take it this first. Who's your least favorite and most favorite Timbers head coach of all time?
Least favorite is definitely Porter. My favorite is Gavin Wilkinson. That was really fun when he was the head coach for like 3 or 4 games.
Yeah, that was, I guess, yeah, from that perspective, it's a good show.
I don't even remember who the first coach was.
John Spencer.
That's right.
Yeah, I actually haven't had that many coaches. I guess it was John Spencer, Gavin Wilkinson, Caleb Porter, and Gio Savarese. So they've only had 4 coaches.
And Gavin Wilkinson was never intended to be.
No, he was a total interim, only coached a few games.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Do you want to play around with this?
Yeah, I mean, it's an almost impossible to answer question. I think the kind of scheme you're installing depends entirely on the coach. If I'm the coach, or if I get to pick my coach, then I would love to see a team that plays a little more quickly, that presses a little higher, that likes to counter. I think that would be a lot of fun, and I think they've got decent personnel to do that even without those guys. But I mean, I'm definitely looking at young attacking players from South America and from second tier leagues in Europe. I think that the best DP signings are targeting guys who are, early prime in those leagues in like Belgium or Argentina or Brazil. I think those are, you've got a good chance of selling those players on. I know the Sounders have tended to look at their core DP guys less as investment players and more as like, we're going to get the best years of this player's career. And I think that's a totally fine approach too, but I think those leagues are still the ones you're going to look at most likely. I'm not a huge fan of the aging superstar strategy. It can obviously work out pretty well. It can also blow up in your face to a pretty large degree. There's not another Lionel Messi out there to sign. So I know that people have sort of wish casted Griezmann, and I think that would be fun.
People, you mean you?
Well, other people have done it too. I mean, and to be clear, like he's not a guy I would go after if I were running the team. But there are worse guys. Like if you're going to go that route, if you're going to sign an aging European player, that there are worse guys to go after than that. But I do think that whatever they do, it has to be holistically thought out.
Yeah,
like they have to have a system in mind. They have to have, and I think that the Sounders do sort of have like an organizational DNA that they go after that sort of guides them in these decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But I hope that organizational DNA is flexible enough that it doesn't force them to sign carbon copies of Nico and Raul, because I don't know whether those are the players you want to build a modern team that you want to compete for the next, 5 to 7 years.
Yeah. I'll just add, I don't think it's unreasonable to think in this scenario that there would be a different head coach, in part because if it's bad enough that they have to blow the roster up that badly, like there's a threat. Like I think Schmetzer's going to be back next year. I really hope he's back, because if he's back, I think that means the Sounders kind of pulled it together this year, and that's frankly what I'd like to see.
Yeah.
But I am also a realist, and if they look like how they've looked the last 5 games over the last 9, I don't think he's going to be back. I don't see how you can bring him back. I mean, there's a threshold. Like, I don't think he's on the hot seat today, but I think that you have to start asking questions about everything.
Yeah.
And like they've been very bad.
Yeah, they've been bad, and bad in a way that is not enjoyable, or bad in a way that is like uniquely frustrating.
Yeah, bad in a way that's like you're banging your head against a wall kind of thing, where you're doing the same stuff and you're expecting different results.
Yep.
And I will give them credit for overhauling their approach this season, but they have not adapted well in season.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep. All right.
I'm going to shout out Rano, because he basically asked the question that we just ended up answering about Brian Schmetzer. So good questions. They're all so good that we've got lots of exposition. But the next one is from Ryboon. Is there any ability in MLS for a team like the Sounders to issue shares to fans to raise capital for signings? I'll chip in $1,000 for irrelevant fractional ownership to make this team competitive again.
Yeah, I mean, there isn't. And like MLS does not accommodate this sort of investment mechanism. I suppose it's possible they could. It would be as easy as the board of directors making a decision, or board of governors to make a decision to allow this kind of investment. They don't. All that said, the premise of the question sort of being like the Sounders don't have any money to spend. They've got plenty of money. Like these guys that they just brought in as owners have money. Don't delude yourself into thinking that the Sounders just can't afford to make these changes. Yeah. I don't think they have limitless capital, and I think they want to be smart about the money they spend, but they have. I mean, they're building like $100 million training facility right now.
There's a narrative emerging that the reason the roster is in the shape that it's in right now is because ownership is not willing to buy out the players that are on the roster. and that they don't have the money to do that. And then even if they did have the money to do that, they wouldn't be willing to spend. And I just do not see any evidence of any of that being true.
No,
They have one buyout
right.
here. Sure, they could have bought out one of Nico or Raul, but they probably don't have somebody to bring in right now. Like maybe there's a scenario where they were working on making a signing and they would have bought somebody out if they had made the signing and they didn't.
And I think it's important also to note that if they were going to do that, that's a decision they would have had to make months ago.
Right.
And months ago, I don't think it was quite so obvious that Nico and Raul are, as washed as they look right now.
Right.
And so, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to make a decision like 2 weeks before the end of the transfer window to buy out one of your two designated, two theoretically most important players, and then make a rushed signing.
Right.
And I'm sure the answer to that is, well, you should always be prepared to make a big signing. Sure, I guess
but that's just not how it works for any clubs that aren't elite level clubs. It's just not.
Yeah.
I mean, it took what, like 3 or 4 months to convince Nico to sign, even.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly.
And I think that it's frustrating because I feel like every time the Sounders have a situation where it feels like they're about to make a big signing or they're going to sign somebody, this crops up again, and it's like before they signed Nico, it was the same thing of like, well, they let Blanco get away because they don't want to pay for him. And then they ended up signing the best player in club history. A couple years later, it was the same deal with Raul, where people are saying, no, they don't want to spend any money. They're gonna sign a free agent from somewhere, and then they pay the biggest transfer fee they've ever paid. I think that it's fine to be frustrated with the speed at which the club does some things, although I think their track record gives them some of the benefit of the doubt there. But I don't think that the answer is always, well, they just don't have the money or they don't want to spend the money. I don't think there's any evidence to support that.
Yeah. I would agree.
Watson's Counter wants to thank everyone for their patience, but now the wait is over. Located at 6420 24th Avenue Northwest in Ballard, they've reopened in a brand new location with the same bomb-ass coffee and the same dumbass vibes. You can still expect their classics like the gochujang fried chicken sandwich and Fruity Pebbles French toast, alongside their new soft serve program and their world-class coffee. Make sure to follow them on Instagram for all the latest and greatest.
All right, so this is from Edward Y. He says, it seems that Nuhu has been victimized recently. Would a formation shift to a 3-5-2 and set up like a back three, Yamar, Reagan, Arriaga, midfield five of Roldan, João Paulo, Atencio, Rusnak, Reed, Baker, Whiting with Chu and Morris as forwards? Does that make sense? So I guess he's talking about benching Nuhu in this scenario.
I'm not opposed to the idea, which I feel like I have a long enough track record as a Nuhu defender to feel okay saying that and feel like it's not reactionary. He's been rough. He's been pretty rough, I think, since he came back from having malaria. And I don't know if that's why he's been rough or what. I mean, I don't want to speculate. But he's not been a good player as long as the Sounders have been playing poorly. I think,
I would say the Atlanta game was about as bad as we've seen him, and it wasn't just that he got beat on both goals. It there was multiple examples of him like diving in and just making really sort of un-Nuhu-esque mistakes.
Nuhu's whole thing has always been his value is in how good of a at marking and taking other players out of games are, and it certainly didn't happen in that game, and that's a tough assignment. But and I don't think Nuhu's I think he could use a couple games off, and I think the Sounders could use a pretty dramatic change, if for no other reason than to sort of wake people up and get people engaged in the way that they're playing again. So I maybe I don't know if this exact formation is what I would pick, but
I mean, I will give this person credit for coming up with a I would give Edward credit for coming up with an interesting way of assembling this, and I do think it would be I'd be intrigued to see how Reed would look as a left wing back.
Yeah.
I don't know if Chu and Morris make sense as a forward combo to me, in part because I just don't think that's Chu. Like I don't think that really works. But I don't think this is I actually am intrigued by the idea of a Yamar, Reagan, Arriaga sort of trio with Roldan with actual wing backs, and it's an interesting look.
I would say that you could, even though I think the impetus for doing this would be getting Nuhu off the field, you could play Nuhu as a nominal left back who stays at home almost entirely, and you could put Roldan at the right center back position and just have a really unbalanced thing where Chu is basically playing as a left winger, even though he's nominally a forward. Could see something like that.
Yeah.
The next one is from Dudesby, who got an answer in the Discord, but maybe some other folks would like the answer. Did we gain some new owners? If true, what is the story behind that?
Yeah, so 3 new owners joined the club last week, I guess. 2 of them are locals. Adam Silipsky, who is apparently the CEO of Amazon Web Services. He used to be the CEO of Tableau. Very rich person. And then Rick Cantu, who is like this is the kind of owner I think we want in the club. He's like a very much a local. He went to SPU. He played soccer at SPU. But him and his brother, I guess, started Redapt, which is like a software company, I think. Is that right? I don't know.
I think they're a IT consulting company, but
there you go. Whatever. He has a lot of money. And then Jay Stein is a little bit more of like a serial investor type. He also has a minority share in Leeds, in the Colorado Rockies, not the Rapids, the baseball team. But he's like a real estate investor type. But all these shares came out of Adrian Hanauer's majority share. So presumably that's actually injecting some potential capital into the club. It's not just, it's not like this. I think one of the things that people didn't entirely appreciate when Joe Roth sold his shares is that wasn't really injecting capital into the club. That was just enriching Joe Roth.
Right.
To the degree that those people were interested in spending money, I suppose that's true. And there was, new ideas and new energy or whatever, but it wasn't necessarily like there was all this new money that they could spend. In this case, it's a little bit more. There's new money that they can potentially spend. All 3 of these guys apparently have expertise that the owners that they think can help. Jay Stein, obviously the real estate stuff. The Sounders are doing all those things with long anchors. You can kind of extrapolate the others there, but yeah, I don't know what to make of it. I can't tell you that what's going to come of it, but that's what happened. All right, so let's see. Gotta go. There was actual conversation going on here, so we got to kind of go down here. All right, so this is from Fat Monk Fullhead. He says the Sounders spent low 8 figures on acquiring or on a commitment to Raul Ruidiaz a few years ago. It was something in the $10 to $13 million range. What do you think our realistic limit is for a single transfer this offseason? And what do you think our total transfer spend will be? This would include buying out Ruidiaz if they decided to do so.
Man, it's a tough question. I could see, I have no idea what the Sounders situation is financially, in terms of cash on hand or what they're willing to commit, because obviously transfer fees are amortized. But I think I can see a scenario. It's not inconceivable to me where they're spending like $16 to $18 million on a single player, but I think in just a transfer fee. But I think if they're doing that, one of their other big signings is a free agent, right? Like, right. I see
what you're saying.
I think 20-ish million has got to be like the limit to how much they would spend on transfer fees in this window. And I think that's almost certainly, I would be shocked if they spent more than that. I think it's probably going to be closer to like, I don't know, 12 to 15 million. That's just in transfer fees. That's not contracts. And I wish that I know this is tilting at one mils, but I wish we talked about total outlay, because I think that's a much better, metric to use. Because if you're spending, $8 million on a player, but their salary is $200,000 because you're paying for their potential,
it's a very different investment.
It's a very different investment. Anyway.
Yeah. I don't know what the budget is. I think 12 to 15 is probably on the higher end, maybe not in the especially if we're just talking about this window. I would say the reason to be bullish on believing they'll spend a lot, though, is they haven't spent any money, like literally any money, in actual cash and transfer fees in the last 4 transfer windows. So that's 2 full seasons worth of transfer windows that they've not spent any money. Prior to that, they had been pretty consistently spending in the $3 to $5 million range every year. And so, right there, you figure that's 10 million potentially on top of whatever they were theoretically budgeting for 2024. And you can get to 20 million using, or I guess that would be 15 million, just using like the basic math of saying like how much they should have in the budget. Now, I don't know how accurate that is, but they, in 2016 they spent, they committed like $10 million to Nico. 2018 they committed $10 million to Rui Diaz. Then they in 2019 2020 they brought in João Paulo on a transfer. They brought in Neymar on a transfer. They brought in Arriaga on a transfer. Then they bought Leo Chu in 2021. So, they were for a while there spending a lot on transfer fees. They've just not been doing that recently as the roster sort of stabilized. And I guess you could argue that the reason they spent all that money was in order to, like, with this in mind. But and they haven't had any out. I think that's one of the big elements is like, I think for this to really be all sustainable, they need to have some outgoing transfer fees, or they need to have money coming in from transfer fees as well. And that's a separate issue, I suppose, from this question. But yeah, I mean, I would think in the $10 to $15 million range is a realistic, hope.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what their strategy is. I mean, we know what Garth's strategy was for players. We don't know what Craig Weibel's strategy is.
That's true.
So yeah, it'll be interesting. All right, next one. This is a fun one from Ben W00001. If you were building a team from scratch next year, one of the thoughts experiments Craig Weibel mentioned, which current starters would you 100% want on that team?
The easy answer, I think, is Christian Roldan.
Yeah.
But that's also, the reality is, we don't know how well he's going to come back.
Yeah.
We just don't. Hopefully he does. I would think, all things being equal, he's probably number 1 on the list. And then after him, I mean, I guess Jackson Reagan, in part because he's so cheap and relatively young. But yeah, I mean, I think everyone else, there's room for questions.
Yeah, it would take a lot for me to say I don't want Jordan Morris to come back or Sao Paulo or.
But if I had to build around one guy,
maybe Leo Chu. Yeah. Well, but I think it's.
Well, I guess that's not what he's saying. He's saying, what starters would you like to have?
Starting now, who would you say I 100% want them back?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, good point. I guess I misconstrued the question. Yeah, I would put all those. Like I think, I guess why I hedge a little bit is that if the price is right, like if you can make a trade if you can get $1.5 million in allocation money for Leo Chu, I think I'd do that.
Yeah.
Jordan Morris a little harder. I'm inclined to want to bring him back almost no matter what, just because I don't know you're going to get the value you want from him. Neymar, like I want to bring Neymar back for sure.
Yeah. I would say I'm like 80% on Neymar. He's a very good player. He and Reagan have a good partnership, but he has value. He's getting older.
Yeah, that's a fair. If the right offer comes.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's none of the designated players.
No.
You know, like I would be happy if Rusnak was back, but not as a designated player. Absolutely not.
Right.
And I mean, I wouldn't be unhappy if he wasn't back, I guess. But I think the thing that I always have to remind myself of is that continuity and familiarity is a big part of a team having success. And so it's like, as much as it can be satisfying to thinking, you know, just being like, let's just get rid of everybody that has pissed us off at any point in time this year. And I've certainly done that, you know, had that thought experiment.
I guess to take this question at face value, I don't think that's what he's suggesting. I think he's just saying, like, if you're starting a team from scratch, which players are you building around?
Yeah.
Right. And so I think there's a case to be made that there's a lot of these players who they aren't. I guess maybe the overarching case or the point it makes to me is like there aren't a lot of players on this team who are inexpendable. Now, I think there's a lot of useful parts, and I think a lot of these guys are going to be back, and they should be back. But if you're asking me, like, gun to your head, like, you make who do you can't imagine trading, and I would say Christian Roldan is probably the closest person just because he ticks so many boxes. But.
Yeah, he and Reagan are the only ones where if I were starting a team completely from scratch, I would probably want them on that team. Yeah.
All right. So this is the last question. This is from Jared. He says, I'm in no way advocating for his exit, but if Schmetz should get sacked, what does that managing short list look like? Preki seems like a natural choice. Pat Noonan seems like an interesting choice. I'll just add, I would not have thought of Pat Noonan, but all of a sudden hearing that intrigues me.
Yeah. Yeah. For whatever reason, I'm not sold on Pat Noonan, and I shouldn't be skeptical considering how good Cincinnati has been, but I'm just not. And I also, I mean, the Sounders could probably pay more. It's certainly a higher profile job. But if you were him, would you leave Cincinnati with all the success?
It's a fair question. I mean, it's a fair question. And it's not like he has real strong ties to the Sounders. He played here one season, and it was mainly because he had a relationship with Siggy.
Yeah. There's not anybody in MLS that necessarily comes to mind. I think Noonan's as good of a shout as you're going to get in MLS. Preki, I mean,
I don't think Preki is. I'll just say I don't think Preki is the obvious choice off of the current.
There's not anybody on the current staff that if they became head coach, I would be. I mean, Juarez is probably like if Schmetz gets fired this year, Juarez is probably the interim, right? But I'm not sure that I would be thrilled with that as a permanent hire.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm skeptical that Gonzo is the right guy, even though I love him and I wish that he would be. But Atlanta has not been very good under his watch. So, I don't know. I mean, there's lots of coaches out there.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to think you have to assume it's someone with Sounders ties.
Yeah.
I think Andy Rose is, of the coaches on the staff, Andy Rose is the one who I think is most likely to be a head coach again. He's also like 32, so I'm a little skeptical that he's going to be the Sounders coach immediately. Who else is out there? There's not. I mean, I don't think this is a situation. Like, I don't want to create a situation where I'm like, oh, you can't fire Schmetzer because there's no one else out there. I mean, at some point, the results are the results, and and I'm not like. So for the sake of this exercise, like, yeah, I like the idea. I will say this. I like the idea of going after a Pat Noonan just because I feel like there's a chance you can sort of like remind everyone we're the Seattle freaking Sounders.
Yeah.
And if we want your guy, we're going to do everything we can to get him. That would be kind of nice,
Piss off the other half of Ohio.
Yeah, right. Exactly. People sometimes, a lot of people might not know the original reason Columbus hated the Sounders was because they basically recruited Siggy right out from under Columbus.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, it's an interesting thought. I do think that whoever succeeds Schmetzer, and whenever that happens, they're going to try to, it's going to be more of a continuity than it is a starting fresh type situation. I just don't think the Sounders, at least right now, they don't have a starting fresh. Like that's just not, it's so ingrained in their DNA that there's like a sense of continuity throughout everything that it would be jarring to see like a foreign coach come in with all new coaches, all new assistants, and all new relationships, and just sort of like starting over. And I would think that almost the only way that happens is if like Adrian isn't the owner, which I suppose is also possible. But
I mean, it's hard to argue with what they've done so far, but I think if they go with continuity and it doesn't work and they make a bad hire, maybe they are less inclined to have the next hire have that be a factor.
Right. That's
but this
I guess
time
that's
around. I think you're right.
Yes, I guess that's sort of the point I'm making. But all right, well that's the show. That was a long mailbag episode.
Yeah, it was.
That was like a whole episode.
Yeah.
But that was a lot of fun. I like taking these Discord questions, and I think we're gonna do this for at least a little while, see how it goes. And I'll just give another plug. To become a Discord, get access to the Discord server, you need to be a Sounder at Heart subscriber at the supporter level or above. So as much as we appreciate the tier we're calling backers, the value add to increasing your sponsorship or your membership is basically getting into the Discord, and there's some other perks as well. But really want to shout out everyone I've been absolutely blown away at how many people have signed up to support Sounder at Heart, to support us, to support Ride of the Valkyries. It's been a really fun thing to see, and I am really genuinely excited about the future of this entire endeavor. And thank you for doing it with us. You listeners are a huge reason why this is working. So thank you. And with that said, I'll sign off thanking also our sponsors, Full Pool Wines and Watson's Counter. I am Jeremiah Shan, signing off for Aaron and Lickett. This is No Sadietes, and you will never let Yacht alone.
We love you. Let's win another one.